So basically the gist of this lesson is you can factor a trinomial. It doesn't, the highest power does not have to be 2. The ones we've been factoring would be like, for example, I don't know, x squared minus 6x plus 9. Okay, and we know we can factor that because the highest power is 2, right? And then we have an x term and a constant term, so we can draw our x and whatever. What? But the thing is, you can actually factor, say we had something like x to the 4th, and I'm just making something up here, plus this might not be factorable, but basically you can use the same method to factor something like this. Okay, and so actually it's very similar to what we've been doing. We're going to take a look and see just exactly how similar it is. So how do you know if you can use the x method even if the highest power is not 2? Well, this is how. As long as the highest power is twice as big as the next highest power. I'm going to go back. I'll go back to this in a second, but does everybody see that this power right here, 4, is twice as big as 2? Okay, and actually it's also true up here. 2 is twice as big as 1, right? Even though you can't see it, there's a 1 right here. So anytime this number is twice as big as this number, you can always use the x method. And in fact, it's very similar to what we've been doing. Now the reality is, if this isn't true, okay, if the highest power is not twice as big as the next, then you cannot, as far as I know, you can't use the x method, okay? But everything on the worksheet will work out that way. The highest power will be twice as big as the next highest power. All right. So first example, we have negative 17x squared plus x to the 4th plus 16. I'm going to say most of the time you don't have to do this. You do not have to order them. In fact, on the worksheet, it's already ordered for you. But just make sure that the highest power comes first, in this case, x to the 4th, and then the next highest power. And then you should have just a number at the end. In this case, it's 16. So it's x to the 4th minus 17x squared plus 16. Any questions about ordering from highest to least? Pretty straightforward, I think. Does everybody see, though, now that this power is twice as big as the next? 4 is twice as big as 2. That means we can use the x method. And also, don't forget, just in case, make sure you pull out a GCF if possible. And there are some like this on the worksheet. Definitely, if they're all even numbers, you can at least pull a 2 out. And again, that's just going to make it easier when you go to do the x. Now, by the way, why can't we pull out a GCF here? Well, this is just 1, right? 1x to the 4th, 17, 6. There's no GCF of those 3 numbers. And then this last term doesn't have an x, so we can't pull an x out. So that's why there's nothing to pull out for this one. Basically, what you're going to do, and I'll explain this because I know this looks a little complicated, but it's really not. What you're basically doing for the first term is you're just taking the square root of it, okay? And what you're ultimately doing is you're taking this exponent and you're cutting it in half. Oh, sorry, not that one. This one. Sorry. This one.
So on the worksheet, will the highest power always?
So on the highest power will always be an even number. In other words, you can cut it in half. So in this case, it's x to the 4th. If you cut it in half, it's x squared, right? So if it was 8, let me start another. Okay. If it was x to the 8th, and you took the square root of that, you could rewrite it as x to the 4th squared, because 4 times 2 is 8. In other words, you're always going to be able to take the first term and write it as a power of 2. You just cut it in half. If it was x to the 6th, and you cut that in half, that'd be x cubed squared. Do what? That's just the first term, yeah. Okay? Yeah, every time you want to take the first term and write it so that it's a power of 2. And obviously that only works when it's even, right? If it's x to the 7th, you can't. That'd be like x to the 3.5 squared. They're all going to be even. Everything on here for the first term is even. It's not. You're not going to deal with that. You can't use the x method that way. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Actually, there's no way, as far as I know, to factor something like that. The next term, whoops. The next term is, again, the next term should just be half of whatever this is. Okay? I normally just put that in parentheses, whatever that is. You'll see why in a second. Well, actually, I'll go ahead and explain it. That way we know how to draw the x. Okay? So, you know, basically what we're getting at, now we're ready to draw the x. That first coefficient is 1, right? The next coefficient is negative 17. Final is 16. So we can draw the x now just like we drew it before. 1 times 16 is going to give you the top, and this number right here gives you the bottom, negative 17. I'll go ahead and tell you that this step right here isn't that important. Only reason I do it is to make sure that the x method will work, but basically you can go from here right to drawing the x. You just put a 1 here, and you can go ahead and straight up draw your x. This is just showing that it actually works. It's actually already in quadratic form. But like I said before, if this power right here is twice as big as this, you can go ahead and go with the x method. So basically, what you're doing here is you can use any letter. If you don't have to use j. But basically, you're taking this x squared right here, and you're using a letter you like. Let's say you can use a. I'll go ahead and put a down here. If you just replaced x squared with a, it would be 1a squared minus 17a. So again, you're just taking the x squared and replacing it with an a plus 16. The reason we do that is because you can easily see now that this is the x method.
So that square doesn't drop when the other one drops.
Why do you change exponents?
Makes it simpler. What you'll do is once you figure out the answer, you'll re-replace a with x squared because that's what it equals, or j or whatever. I think the reason I use j is because last time I taught this, that's the letter they wanted to use. So yeah, the point is this looks exactly like something we've already done. That's the point. We're trying to use something we've already learned to solve something that's a little bit more complicated with an x squared.
That answer is the x method?
Correct.
Oh my gosh, this is going to take forever.
No, it doesn't. I'll do one on the worksheet. It'll take 2 minutes. Not even that. Okay. Now we're going to draw the x after you use that letter. Again, you don't have to use j. You can use any letter to represent x squared, just to make it simpler. And again, you don't have to do all this. I'm going to do it another way where we bypass this letter substitution and just go straight to the x, and you guys can determine which way you think is simpler. In the past, I've had some students like to replace it with a letter, and some like to go straight to the x, so I'll do it both ways for you. So anyway, again, let me actually quiz you guys. What's going to go at the top of the x? Yeah, 1 times 16, go on the top. What's going to go on the bottom? Negative 17. Okay. This is a little small. Wish I would have made it bigger, but yeah. 16 on the top, a times c on the top, and b on the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and fill it in for you. Two numbers that multiply to give you 16 are negative 1 and negative 16. Add to give you negative 17. So there's your solution for that. And then when you break down this expression, again, it doesn't have to be j. It can be whatever you want to use. You could even use x. I don't care. But x doesn't really work because it's already x squared. So you're going to break down the middle expression into minus 1j minus 16j. We talked about this before, but the order doesn't matter. You can put the minus 16j first and the minus 1j second. I don't think it's going to matter. And then you pull out a GCF of the first two, which is j. You're left with j minus 1. Then you're going to pull out a GCF of the next two. Remember, if this first term in the second pair is negative, pull out a negative. So that's why I pulled out negative 16. Then you're left with j minus 1. And how will you know we did it correctly? Because what's in the parentheses is the same. They're both j minus 1. Can anybody tell me what the final factoring would be based on this right here? J minus 1, j minus 16. Right. I'll give you guys a second. Okay, so there's your final answer. Like you guys said, j minus 1, j minus 16. That's not the final answer because what did we say j was? Yeah, so basically, you know, once you finally factor it, you can just replace the j with x squared. That's it. Yes, I will show you the, if you don't substitute, I'll show you how to do it, and you can decide which one you like better. Well, if it's multiple choice, you know, you'll look at this and you'll say, well, none of the answer choices have a j in them, so then it'll remind you to replace it with the x squared. But that's the last step. Just replace the variable by the original expression, which in this case is x squared. So now that we've done it that way, I'll do it the other way. I'll do it on one slide, and you can decide which way you like better. I'm just going to rewrite the problem.